Florence Nightingale was a famous English nurse, known for her work in the Crimean War. Florence Nightingale was born in 1820 in Florence, Italy, for which she was named. Nightingale was inspired to enter nursing from a calling from God in 1837. She worked hard at educating herself in the science and art of nursing, despite continuing opposition from her family. Nightingale began travelling and met Sidney Herbert in Rome in 1847. Herbert had been Secretary at War until 1946, and would later return to this position during the Crimean War. Nightingale and Herbert became close friends, and she then went on to travel to Egypt and Greece, where she began writing, and then underwent 4 months of training in Kaiserwerth in Germany in 1851. This enabled her to become superintendent at the Institute for Sick Gentlewomen in Upper Harley Street, London, until 1854. During the Crimean War, reports began to filter back to London about the horrific conditions that wounded soldiers had to endure, so on the 21st of October 1854, Florence and her trained 38 volunteer nurses were sent by Sidney Herbert to the Selimiye barracks in modern-day Istanbul, Turkey. Nightingale and her team found terrible conditions for the wounded in the barracks, with huge numbers of fatalities from infection and poor hygiene, as well as a lack of medicine and supplies. Nightingale sent a plea to the Times newspaper to implore the government to send aid, and a prefabricated hospital was constructed in England and shipped to the Dardanelles. The overcrowding in the hospital and the defective sewers proved to be so fatal to the patients that a sanitary commission was sent to the hospital in 1855, which improved ventilation and flushed out the sewers. The death rates sharply fell, but Nightingale continued to maintain that poor nutrition and overworking was leading to the high death rates. It wasn't until she returned to England and began collecting data that she discovered that most of the soldiers died from poor living conditions. This greatly influenced her career, and she began to advocate sanitary conditions in hospitals. In 1855, the Nightingale Fund was set up to fund the training of nurses, and in 1859 the Nightingale Training School, now called the Florence Nightingale School of Nursing and Midwifery, was set up, and the first nurses began working in 1865. In 1870, Nightingale trained Linda Richards, America's first trained nurse, who went on to become a great nursing pioneer in the USA and Japan. Nightingale was awarded several honours by Queen Victoria, but was bedridden from 1957 onwards. She continued to write and carried out pioneering work on hospital planning, but died at the age of 90 in 1910. Her lasting legacy is that of founding the modern nursing profession with her compassion, patient care, and hospital planning. International Nurses' Day is celebrated on her birthday every year.
간호사관 47기로 임관하여 전후방 각지의 병원에서 희생과 봉사의 나이팅게일 정신을 실현하여 왔습니다. 특히 정신보건 간호장교로서 장병들의 정신건강 증진을 위한 임상실무 및 학문적 발전을 위해 노력하고 있으며 천안함, 연평도 사건 시 생존 장병들의 정신건강 지원팀으로 활동하기도 하였습니다. 이러한 업적을 인정받아 정신간호학 교수로 선발되어 현재 국군간호사관학교에서 정신간호학을 가르치고 있으며 후배들에게 귀감이 되어 오늘 10년 후배인 57기 간호사관 생도들의 나이팅게일로 선정되었습니다. 촛불점화, 촛대 전달은 간호학과장과 선임간호학 교수가 하겠습니다. 2학년생도 앞으로.
Florence Nightingale was a pioneer of public health and the founder of modern nursing.
Because of Florence Nightingale, nursing is one of the most regulated and respected professions in the world.
Named after her city of birth, Florence, Italy, Florence Nightingale was born on May 12, 1820, into an upper-class British family.
As a woman of her time and her class, it would have been expected that she would marry, maintain a lovely home, and be a hostess. But Florence Nightingale had very different plans. Though at the time nursing was not a respected profession, Nightingale felt very called to become a nurse.
At age 24, Nightingale defied her parents' expectations to marry a suitable match and left England to study at the Kaiserswerth Hospital in Dusseldorf, Germany.
When she returned from Germany, she took a job as a nurse at a hospital in London, and she was eventually promoted after only a year to be head of nursing there.
She improved sanitary conditions so much that she garnered a reputation as a reformer and as an advocate for public health.
During the Crimean War, the British press made public the horrendous conditions of the wounded soldiers in Turkey. The army turned to Florence Nightingale for help.
Sidney Herbert, Secretary at War, reached out directly to Nightingale. When Nightingale and her band of nurses arrived at Scutari, the hospital in the Crimea, they were shocked at what they found.
The field hospitals were positioned on cesspools of putrid water. Patients were lying in their filth. More soldiers were dying from infections than they were from wounds sustained on the battlefield.
Many of the reforms that Florence Nightingale instituted were quite revolutionary. Nightingale insisted that there be fresh air and water for all the soldiers, that recuperating soldiers receive healthy food to eat to help make them better, and that all of the bandages and sheets and blankets were adequately laundered each day.
By the time she was done, Florence Nightingale had succeeded in reducing the death rate within these military hospitals by 2/3.
Known as the Angel of the Crimea, Nightingale returned to England and received a hero's welcome, a medal from Queen Victoria, and a gift of $250,000. She devoted the rest of her life to effecting change in medical care.
In 1860, Florence Nightingale founded at St. Thomas Hospital in London the Nightingale Training School for Nurses.
She was a pioneer in the use of cutting-edge statistical methods of the time to design hospitals and medical systems to maximize the health of the community at large.
This really helped her to make her message known to the parliamentarians and government agencies who would make important decisions about hospitals and healthcare.
In her later years, Nightingale was officially honored by Germany, France, Norway, and numerous prestigious British societies. She died at her London home on August 13, 1910.
The fact that we have a nursing profession today is in large part thanks to the work of Florence Nightingale.